Every day, your scanners and security tools might detect hundreds, or even thousands, of vulnerabilities. If you treat them all equally, you'll either drown in work or waste valuable resources fixing low-risk issues while real threats linger. As a security leader, your job is to make sure that prioritization happens strategically. You need to guide your teams to focus on what truly matters, using a mix of standardized scoring models and business-specific context. Prioritization isn't about doing more, it's about doing the right things first. When you're working with vulnerabilities, one of the first things you'll encounter is the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS. It gives you a standardized way to assess the severity of a vulnerability, using a score that ranges from 0, means no severity, to 10, means critical severity. This score helps you quickly gauge how dangerous a vulnerability might be. CVSS looks at several key factors to calculate that score, such as how easy the vulnerability is to exploit, means attack complexity, whether an attacker needs to be authenticated, how much it impacts confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and how widely it affects systems across your environment. Generally, the higher the score, the more severe the risk. But here's what you need to keep in mind. CVSS is just the beginning. It gives you a valuable baseline, but not the full picture. If you stop at the score, you risk making decisions without understanding the true impact on your business. You'll need to layer in context to make smart prioritization choices. Why CVSS alone is not enough? If you prioritize vulnerabilities only based on CVSS scores, you're missing critical risk dimensions. Two vulnerabilities might both have a score of 9.0, but one could impact a production database holding sensitive customer data, while the other affects a development server used for testing. Without context, you risk wasting effort on vulnerabilities that don't truly endanger your organization. That's why you need to layer business context over CVSS scores when making prioritization decisions. When you prioritize vulnerabilities, you can't rely on severity scores alone. You must add business context to make smart, risk-based decisions. Here's how you should approach it. When it comes to asset criticality, you need to ask yourself, what is the role of the affected asset? Is it supporting a mission-critical application that keeps the business running, a public-facing system that's exposed to the internet, or simply a low-impact internal tool? Vulnerabilities on high-value assets demand urgent attention because the business consequences of an exploit would be far more damaging. For data sensitivity, you must determine whether the system stores or processes regulated, personal, or otherwise sensitive information. If a breach could expose customer data, intellectual property, or financial records, the risk goes beyond technical loss. It becomes a legal, reputational, and operational crisis. High-sensitivity assets always deserve higher priority. When assessing threat intelligence, you should check if there are known exploits already being used in the wild. A vulnerability that has an active exploit kit available becomes far more dangerous. If you see credible reports that attackers are already weaponizing it, that vulnerability needs to move to the top of your remediation list, regardless of its CVSS score. Looking at exposure and accessibility, you need to ask whether the vulnerable system is directly reachable from the internet. Public-facing systems, like web servers, VPN gateways, and cloud assets, carry a much higher risk profile because attackers can find and target them easily. Internal systems, while still important, often have more layers of defense to shield them. Finally, don't overlook compliance and regulatory requirements. Some vulnerabilities, if left unresolved, could put your organization out of compliance with critical frameworks like PCI DSS, IPAA, GDPR, or industry-specific regulations. In some cases, failing to patch could result in audits, fines, or even legal penalties. When compliance is on the line, prioritization must reflect that urgency. By combining CVSS severity with these business realities, you gain a far clearer, risk-driven view of your environment. This helps you decide which vulnerabilities must be fixed immediately and which ones can be scheduled for later remediation, making your vulnerability management program both smarter and more defensible. As a security leader, you need to build a workflow that makes vulnerability prioritization both structured and risk-driven. You should start by using CVSS scores to trigger the initial categorization. Let those scores act as a quick first filter to sort vulnerabilities into broad severity buckets: high, medium, or low. But don't stop there. You must layer business context into the workflow by applying asset classification and enriching your analysis with threat intelligence. This step ensures that you are not just treating all criticals the same, but recognizing when a medium severity vulnerability on a high-value system is actually more urgent than a critical one on a test server. When you identify high-risk vulnerabilities, those with a combination of high technical severity, sensitive asset exposure, active exploitation, or compliance implications, you need to escalate them for urgent action. These are the vulnerabilities that should trigger emergency patches, leadership briefings, and accelerated timelines. For medium-risk vulnerabilities, you should plan them into your standard maintenance windows. These are important, but do not warrant immediate disruption to operations. Scheduling them into regular update cycles ensures they are addressed in a timely but controlled manner. Finally, for low-risk issues, you need to ensure they are documented, tracked, and revisited periodically. Even if immediate remediation isn't necessary, you want a system that keeps these vulnerabilities visible, because context can change, and today's low risk could become tomorrow's threat if exposure increases or new exploits emerge. By building this kind of risk-based prioritization workflow, you give your team much-needed clarity, provide your leadership with actionable visibility, and deliver your business the focused protection it truly needs to thrive. So, what's your leadership takeaway? If you take just one thing from this session, it's this. CVSS gives you a number. Context gives you meaning. You cannot lead an effective vulnerability management program without combining both. Use CVSS as your starting point, but always apply real-world judgment about where vulnerabilities fit within your organization's unique risk landscape. When you prioritize well, you not only protect systems, you protect trust, reputation, and business resilience.